Members of Council, members of Senate, Chairperson of Senate, the Principal and Vice Chancellor, members of the Executive Management and Extended Management, members of the UNISA academic community, colleagues, our students, and ladies and gentlemen. Sanbonani, good afternoon, Molweni, goeiemiddag, and Dima Degwan. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to Prof. Vimbi, Petrus Mahlangu's inaugural lecture. I also want to take this opportunity to welcome and acknowledge Professor N.E. Magwe, Acting Executive Dean of the College of Education. I also do want to acknowledge Professor S.T. Mampane, Professor in the Department of Educational Management and Leadership, who will be respondent to Prof. Mahlangu's inaugural lecture. I also want to take this opportunity to welcome the college leadership, Prof. Mahlangu's colleagues, friends present here today. It also gives me great pleasure to welcome and acknowledge Prof. Mahlangu's family in attendance. Ladies and gentlemen, as I take this opportunity to welcome all of you to the University of South Africa, the University of the land. We do know that COVID-19 pandemic had caused havoc in ways we do things. The years 2020 and 2021 will go down in history as the years which defined the new normal. Unfortunately, COVID disrupted economies globally and placed in disarray our social systems, and lest we forget, the loss of life in ways unimaginable across the world. We as UNISA, of course, were not spared. We had lost a number of staff and students, more importantly, family members and friends. Of major concern with COVID-19 pandemic, ladies and gentlemen, was the impact it had on our ability to deliver services to our students, though we have, through our learning management systems, managed to deliver both the learning content and assessments in ways unimaginable. Our technology saved us and our students the extended academic years. Through these actions, though these actions have helped, it does not mean these efforts were without challenges. We all know that UNISA is the longest existing, dedicated, and largest distance education institution in the world, as it was founded in 1873. We do cater for a student population that is equivalent to 1/3 of all South African higher education institutions and constituted more than 90% of all students enrolled in distance learning programs. Historically, this university is perhaps the only university in South Africa to have provided all people with access to education, irrespective of race, color, or creed. Today, we also pride ourselves for having the first woman principal and vice chancellor in 149 years. This is indicative of our efforts to ensure that UNISA continues to be the transformative university in the service of humanity. I should also point out that next year, 2023, plans are underway to celebrate 150 years of service. As a comprehensive open distance and e-learning institution, what we call CODEL, we are guided by the principles of lifelong learning, student-centeredness, innovation, and creativity. Because of CODEL, we contribute to the knowledge creation, advancement of humankind, and the development of a critical citizenry to advance global sustainability. We achieve this through our learner-centered approach, which provides for lifelong learning in flexible learning environment through interactive learning materials, thereby increasing access into higher education for most disadvantaged learners. We also pride ourselves in the development and promotion of our own staff so that they can continue to support our students and communities around us. We are very grateful that this inaugural lecture is taking place within the context of our renewed spirit, in the context of our revised UNISA 2030 strategy and our strategic plan. In some ways, Prof. Mahlangu's inaugural lecture has come at the right time. It is the time for serious consideration of transformation ideals within the context of UNISA, our higher education sector, and South Africa as a whole. We are proud that today, UNISA continues to demonstrate the value of a strong cadre of professorship that is necessary to instill in our students critical thinking and analysis of the highest order. This is a very proud moment for every academic as it reflects one of the pinnacles of academic achievement. It does give me great pleasure that our rank of full professor is growing substantially, and we are of the view that such will also grow our research expertise in leaps and bounds in South Africa, our continent, and the world. Ladies and gentlemen, in terms of today's proceedings, Prof. Makwe will introduce Prof. Mahlangu and invite him to the podium. Prof. Mampane will then follow Prof. Mahlangu with a response without any further announcements. I do now invite Prof. Makwe to the podium. Thank you very much.
My role here, ladies and gentlemen, friends, children who are here, is to introduce to you Professor Vimbi Petrus Mahlangu, who is also in the College of Education. And Professor Mahlangu holds the following qualification: a Standard 10 from Hlanganani High School in Soshanguve, a BA Ed degree from Vista University, a Bachelor of Education, Masters of Education, and a PhD in Education from the University of Pretoria. He also has the Certificate of Competence from the Assessment College of South Africa Limited to conduct moderation of outcome-based assessments, training certificate from Clinical Trial Center at University of Hong Kong to conduct research ethics evaluation, good clinical practice, introduction to research ethics and informed consent. He completed a seminar for university teachers from Anglophone African countries, which was sponsored by the Ministry of Commerce and organized by Northeast Normal University in Changchun, the Republic of China. He was also the recipient of the Dean's Award in Teaching from the College of Education at the University of Pretoria. He joined UNISA on the 1st of September 2016 and at that time he became a member also of the Bulgarian Comparative Education Society. He is a primary lecturer in different models and also a secondary lecturer for a number of modules in the college, where he's also in the Department of Educational Leadership. During his time at UNISA, he acted as a chair of the department in the Department of Educational Leadership for 3 months in 2021. He's also involved in the NRF-funded project on the dynamics of higher education space and place in sub-Saharan Africa, which is led by Professor Madigizela Madia. He has trained principals in leadership and management in Mpumalanga, in Nelspruit in Mpumalanga, trained TVET lecturers in Newcastle in the Majuba project about research writing skills. He is involved in the training of Nigerian private school principals. He is also involved in the supervision of students on the TVET project and other engaged scholarship activities. He published a book entitled Toxic Relationship Between the Principal and School Governing Body. He also edited a book entitled Reimagining New Approaches in Teacher Professional Development. During his tenure as a professor, he has supervised 14 master's students and 10 doctoral students to completion. He has published 17 articles in accredited journals and 8 in non-accredited journals, 23 book chapters, attended more than 16 international conferences in countries such as Finland, China, Mozambique, Mauritius, Bulgaria, and many, many more countries. He is the chair of Higher Education Degrees Committee in the Department of Educational Leadership and Management at UNISA. He's also a member of the Disciplinary Students Appeals Committee at UNISA, where he's also a member of Research Ethics Committee in the College of Education at UNISA. He is a mentor to many colleagues in the College of Education. He is involved in teaching, engaged scholarship, academic citizenship, and academic leadership and research. Now, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce to you our inaugurant, Professor Vimbi Mahlangu, to come and share his ideas as he's moving towards this space, which is the ultimate goal that every scholar have to reach. Over to you, Professor Mahlangu.
Let me begin by expressing my gratitude, Professor S.K. Ndlovu, Vice Principal, Strategy, Risk and Advisory Services, Prof. N.E. Makwe, Acting Executive Dean, College of Education, Prof. S.T. Mampane, my respondent. All protocol observed. I greet you all. I appreciate you giving me the chance to deliver my first lecture. I would like to show my appreciation to the Almighty, my late father, Mangum, my mother, Nozimango, my wife, Sibongile, my son, Togozo, my daughter, Mpilo, and her husband, Lucky, my sisters, brothers, nieces, and all other family members, as well as my mentor, Professor Vijay Pitswe, my current and former mentees, colleagues, and friends. Indeed, I appreciate all the support as I embark on this huge and significant moment in my career. It is well known that the Zondo Commission revealed numerous crises with ethical leadership poisoning organizations in South Africa. The world is becoming more conscious of ethics and ethical leadership as a result of numerous scandals that have occurred in a variety of sectors, such as state-owned corporations and government institutions, owing to unethical conduct by those organizations' leaders. It would be wrong to think that because unethical behavior had been exposed, the golden era of frauds and corruption had ended and that organizations had reached a turning point due to democracy and open management. As long as fraudulent actions continue to deplete organizations of resources and offer difficulties for managers and leaders, I contend ethical leadership is becoming toxic in organizations. Research approach. This lecture uses the dimension diamond fraud theory covered in literature study by asking, why is ethical leadership turning toxic in organizations and institutions? The review's theoretical foundation of addressing why ethical leadership is becoming toxic in organizations is the fraud diamonds hypothesis. Let's look at ethical leadership. The exhibition of normatively appropriate behavior through one's actions and interpersonal actions, as well as the encouragement of such behavior to follow us through two-way communication, reinforcement, and decision-making are all components of ethical leadership. Milhelik, Lipnik, and Tekavik agree with Akiopodo and Spaidiakis that ethical leadership entails acting fairly, considering the welfare of others, and considering the effects of one's actions. A code of conduct, a good institution or organization, or a plethora of good intentions do not automatically translate into ethical leadership. It is a decision made by an individual, or rather a sequence of decisions that result from the intricate interaction of internal values and external societal pressures. Honesty, generosity, fairness, and respect must all be regulated behaviors under ethical leadership. Leaders who uphold ethics must act in a way that benefits others and refrain from bad behavior. These leaders need to uphold morality in all of their behaviors, attitudes, and values. They have a responsibility to lead by moral example. They must go beyond simply being trustworthy, disciplined, and fair leaders. They must promote moral behavior among their supporters by outlining moral values and goals, providing moral guidance, and holding employees accountable for their good and bad deeds as supporters. They should resist temptations and serve as moral role models for their followers. Collective motivation, honesty, empowerment, and selflessness are traits of ethical leadership that are often seen as essential to effective leadership in organizations. People of character who work to change the unacceptable habits can help to tackle the problem of toxic workplaces. In order to prevent organizational politics and lower the likelihood that someone will become a victim of workplace bullying, the leader's ethical leadership is crucial in fostering a supportive and ethical workplace culture. Vice Chancellor and Principal, employees that are dealing with extreme unfavorable working conditions and job uncertainty need ethical leadership behavior. By acting fairly and openly in their decision-making, ethical leaders are expected to encourage proper workplace behavior. Employees may regard organizational regulations and processes as just and legitimate when leaders act ethically to help relieve concerns about the instability of their job and working circumstances. The role of ethical leaders in organizations or institutions is to act as reliable information sources to increase the accountability and predictability of organizations' actions. This will help employees deal with uncertainty about their job. With significant tasks and emotional resources, ethical leadership behavior can also lower employees' negative feelings and attitudes if they care about employees' personal struggles and give them fair opportunity. This may also help them make meaningful contribution at work. Organizations are becoming poisonous because of unethical leaders. Leaders that are destructive do not assist their followers. Leadership that is destructive doesn't happen by accident. There is a toxic triangle consisting of the leader, the follower, and the environment. This triangle must exist for unethical and toxic leadership to flourish. Dominance, force, intimidation, coercion, and manipulation are examples of destructive leadership. On the other side, influence, persuasion, and commitment are traits of constructive and ethical leadership. Selfishness by toxic leaders in organizations serves as an example of destructive leadership. According to Baloyi 2020, Leadership is one of the most important functions in life and should provide organizations or institutions with a competitive edge. It is believed that leadership is the process by which a leader motivates followers to work together to accomplish the organization's objectives. Because of the toxicity at their jobs, people who work in toxic settings frequently have little to no choice but to lose energy and become demoralized. An example is the tale of bosses who make fun of their workers in public, subject them to emotional and physical suffering, and encourage rivalry among workers while they are still considered co-workers. A poll of 14,000 employees and 800 managers concluded that the repercussions of workplace disrespect on people have grave consequences for organizations. Employees who worked in toxic settings reported exerting less effort, spending less time at work, and producing lower quality work. Employee personality changes as a result of stressful workplace relationships are the most alarming effect of workplace rudeness. People may alter their beliefs during traumatic circumstances as a result of uncertainty, anxiety, and difficult choices. The following behaviors are displayed by toxic leaders, specifically when dealing with their employees. In addition to demoralizing, intimidating, and engaging in unethical behavior, toxic leaders also intentionally feed their followers illusions that increase the leader's power. They limit the followers' ability to act, play to their most basic fears and needs, identify scapegoats, and encourage others to criticize followers while improperly clinging to power. According to Aubrey 2012, toxic leaders damage the culture and climate of their organizations over time. They enjoy putting others down in order to succeed. Additionally, they desire to show off their power and superiority over their subordinates. Toxic leaders exhibit bad leadership traits such as dishonesty, unfair treatment of followers, lack of support for followers, distorting or withholding information, disloyalty, authoritarian behavior, personal attacks on followers, being unapproachable, and acting heartlessly and insensitively. Typically, toxic managers intimidate and threaten their workforce to put them under pressure. Vice Principal, toxic leaders, by driving goals and ignoring rules, they are likely to affect policies. They don't take responsibility to their acts. They communicate poorly and don't acknowledge or encourage staff members. Individuals, when faced with potentially dangerous conditions, they have a tendency to withdraw their effort and involvement at work in an effort to reclaim their own independence. Employees could unwittingly lower their participation in order to reclaim their own liberty as a result of witnessing their superiors' abusive behavior. The toxic effects of unethical leadership in organizations. The fraud diamond theory identifies the following 4 elements or factors that cause moral leaders to become toxic leaders in organizations. The first one is the incentive or pressure. They can be motivated by a need or a desire to deceive others in order to become toxic. The second factor is the opportunity. They might identify a systemic flaw in the organization and take advantage of it. For example, they see the potential for fraud. The third factor is the rationalization. They may persuade themselves that the risks involved in their dishonest behavior are justified. And the fourth one is the capability. They possess the qualities and skills required to be the most suitable candidate to pull it off. They might see the chance for fraud and be able to make it happen in their organizations. According to Windiana and Windiawati, organizations need to manage the fraud diamonds element. Leaders who have personally faced injustice and violations are more likely to treat their followers badly. A trickle-down phenomena in which pressure and tension flow from one level to the next is linked to negative leadership and organizational and supervisory strain. A toxic boss, according to Reid, intimidates and threatens. The toxic leadership syndrome has three main components, namely a seeming lack of care for subordinates' welfare, a personality trait or interpersonal technique that has a negative impact on the culture of an organization, and the followers believe that the leader's motivations are essentially selfish. Wilson Starks, 2003, believes that a toxic leadership style hurts both the organization and its members over time. People who are more completely use their mental resources, critical thinking, and questioning skills are excluded from decision-making and positions of influence in a toxic leadership environment. Those who are rewarded are the people agreeing with the boss, while others are punished for having an opposing opinion. One of the most difficult problems affecting organizations and institutions in the majority of the world's nations is fraud. Institutions and organizations and people as workers with leadership responsibilities may be subjected to accusations of fraud or corruption. Fraud indicates that corruption may occur as a result of insufficient professionalization of the bureaucracy in institutions, a lack of oversight and control mechanisms, a lack of openness and accountability, and other factors. According to Ratmonu and Friendly, 2022, managing fraud continues to be a major concern for organizations around the world. Organizational and institutional fraud is driven by opportunities, inducements or pressure, justifications, and capacity to commit fraud, with capacity being the determining element. Because personnel working in these institutions are more likely to be exposed to fraud, there are risks factors that could motivate them to commit fraud. Therefore, institutions are more susceptible to the risk of fraud. White-collar crimes in organizations may result from ethical leaders turning toxic, damaging public trust in the organizations and posing systemic dangers to the efficient operation of the organizations. The pressure that leads to fraud might come from within individual, the organization, the workplace, or from the outside. According to Hart, Quate et al. 2022, the motivation for committing fraud is inducement or pressure. Some situations encourage or make it necessary for people to engage in fraud rather than control it. Incentives takes into account an employee's mentality to motivate behaviors that lead them to avoid managing fraud. Personal issues like the cost of a marriage, divorce, medical expenses, and other issues like unmanaged debt and greed can put a strain on finances. Some organizational leaders may be fixated on power and terrified of changing their lifestyle and losing their social position. In the context of an organization, pressure is present when a leader instructs subordinates to engage in unethical behavior, which will lead to obedience pressure. For instance, the integrity survey results from 2008 to 2009 revealed that 59% of managers and employees felt pressured to do whatever it took to meet their goals. 52% of managers and employees think they will be rewarded if they achieve their goals. And 49% of managers and employees worry about losing their jobs if they don't. Occupational pressure is a type of pressure that is frequently present in the workplace and challenging to avoid. The internal organization or outside parties who are still connected to the organization are the source of this pressure. While external pressure comes from high-ranked members who hold power, internal pressure comes from leaders acting as superiors. When internal organizations put pressure on individuals, leaders of the organization may manufacture fraud and drive it from the top down using potent tools like approval to authority. Employees will be forced to choose between refusing the leader's orders, and doing so can result in fraudulent behavior. If the employee does not follow such unlawful directive, they risk being terminated or changed. The opportunity in the organization is the absence of structure and governance that would regulate how operations are managed and how assets are used. Where an effective structure exists, there is a chance fraud won't happen because the person will be under a lot of pressure to do it. Lack of organizational structure, poor monitoring, and the character of the organization are the three components that make up the opportunity factor. These flaws are the main factors that lead to fraud in internal control. Managerial rationalization or attitude may be used to justify deception with the goal of outsmarting rivals or reaping financial rewards. It is a defense that someone who cannot handle fraud can use it to justify accepting to conduct fraud. Diliana et al. 2022 discovered that individuals who engage in fraud within organizations will defend their unethical actions and claim that committing fraud is a fair course of action. The ability to conduct fraud is a matter of the knowledge, self-assurance, and position the manager as an individual possesses. The ability is connected to intelligence, and the authoritative position allows the holder to take advantage of internal weaknesses under pressure by rationalizing. According to the concept of capability, 6 factors enable people to commit fraud. These include key position or function, intellectual capacity, confidence and ego of the employees, effective misrepresentation, immunity to stress and guilt, and cohesive ability. Vice Chancellor and Principal. Allegations of state capture, corruption, fraud, and irregularities relating to tenders in organizations like the South African Airports Company, South African Airways, Technical and South African Express, Bosasa, Denel, Estina, Prasa, SABC, SARS, State Security Agency, and Transnet were among the examples of unethical behavior covered in the evidence presented before the Zondo Commission. The Zondo Commission's evidence showed how unethical leadership can poison an organization, and higher education institutions are not exempt. According to Omkwes, Eskrik, Brock, Chiva, and Alcam, 2021, organizations should have genuine leaders who can foster open communication, transparency, and strong bonds. By encouraging knowledge sharing, leaders should display their actual selves and not hide information or keep their opinions to themselves themselves. Genuine leaders promote relationships among equals and are able to inspire engagement and communication from all team members. Due to their consideration of others' perspectives, these leaders may encourage collaborative decision-making. When making decisions, they consider as much pertinent information as they can and ask out opinions that contradict their own beliefs. When ethical leaders are becoming toxic, they will communicate with employees in the following manner. Don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. Every time you are late for work, you will lose 1 hour's pay. Have the completed work on my desk by 4 o'clock. You are expected to be at your office or desk at all times, except during designated tea and lunch times. In conclusion, in this talk, I made the case that organizational leaders should work to improve the ethical climate among their workforce by pursuing ethical leadership. Theoretically, harsher fines can limit fraud and unethical behavior in organizations. However, dishonest leaders and managers who hold influential positions typically demand bigger bribes. Institutions should set up a method of reporting misconduct that is free from institutional control by ensuring confidentiality and offering of protection. By taking initiative, ethical leaders may help reduce toxic leadership in organizations. To make their ideas a reality and demonstrate to followers how things can be done, they must take the initial step. These leaders need to be visionary. This means they need to have goals and strategies for where they want to take their organizations. They must be able to communicate with members of their team. They should inform team members of their decisions rather than forcing decisions upon them. When leaders and their teams communicate, trust and confidence are increased. Leaders should consider all relevant factors before making judgments. They ought to enforce their influence by persuasion rather than by pressure. They must be creative in coming up with new solutions to challenges, taking changes to support organizations in minimizing toxic inclinations. Leaders should have morals and integrity because they hold positions of authority. They ought to be reliable. They should figure out better ways of group members to acknowledge their mistakes and take constructive action. Instead of traumatizing and mocking employees, toxic leaders must recognize their shortcomings and eliminate them if they want to prevent their organizations from becoming toxic. I thank you.
Let me start by thanking the Vice-Chancellor, Prof. Nkabula, the Vice Principal, Strategy, Risk and Advisory Services, Prof. S.K. Ndlovu, the Acting Executive Dean, Prof. Mpine Makwe, and the inaugurant, Prof. Vimbi Mahlangu. I'm grateful for the opportunity to comment on Professor Vimbi Mahlangu's lecture, Why Ethical Leadership is Becoming Toxic in Organizations and Institutions, using the diamond fraud theory. The inspiring presentation by Professor Vimbi Mahlangu leads us to Professor Lumumba's discourse on leadership. I cite, "In any type of organization, leadership is always at the center of human affairs. Men will always be preoccupied with leadership, and it will always be a topic of discussion," unquote. It compares to this presentation as follows. Organizations need leaders, but not just any leader. We are reminded of the fact that if an organization is led by an unethical leader who lacks leadership skills, chances are that the position may have been obtained through deception due to a systemic fault in the organization. This is widely acknowledged and supported by trustworthy evidence. Unethical leaders abuse their position because of recognizing the existence of fraudulent practices in the organization. Toxic leaders are aware that there are few consequences associated with acting dishonestly, but the position attained allows them to utilize bribes to get what they want in the organization. This typical occurrence is not beyond our comprehension, but serves as a reminder that dishonest behavior does not only foster unethical behavior, but also makes workplaces toxic. Extremely unfavorable working conditions of fear and selfishness are created through workplace bullying, unsupportive and unethical workplace culture, which leads to toxic leadership. Prof. Mahlangu makes a case in his presentation that moral leaders are needed because these leaders can give up everything they have in order to alter organizational conditions. They make their followers realize goals and assist them in regaining their dignity. To promote appropriate workplace behavior, they treat subordinates fairly, candidly, and include them in decision-making processes. Ethical leaders inspire their followers to cooperate in order to achieve the goals of the organization. This point of view is in line with the view that ethical leadership outweighs a toxic leadership style, which will eventually harm both the organization and its people. Fraud claims that, among other things, the lack of professionalization of the bureaucracy in institutions lead to corruption. According to Ratmunu and Friendly, combating fraud should remain a top priority for businesses everywhere. It is our responsibility to clearly state to unethical leaders that we will not stand by while they normalize absurdity and exhibit extreme greed. It is our responsibility to remind them that stress leads to unhealthy competition among co-workers. It also leads to decreased efforts and productivity and the creation of sub-minimum work. The reality is that effective organizational behavior that tackles workplace uncertainty calls for an accountability and predictability. Therefore, the typical toxic leader's abusive behavior needs to be reported. Prof. Mahlangu, I would like to thank you for presenting this fresh scholarly work to all of us present here today. I thank you.
members of Council, members of Senate, Madam Principal and Vice Chancellor, members of the academic community, students, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the University Council and Senate and the leadership of the university, please join me in officially welcoming Professor Vimbi Mahlangu to the ranks of full professor at the University of South Africa. Prof. Mahlangu, thank you very much for the complex, instructive, and provocative lecture. It comes at an opportune time as we are engaging ourselves in curricular deliberations and transformation. We as UNISA pride ourselves as the African university shaping futures in the service of humanity. We are pleased to have you amongst UNISA's professors. As a university, we have embarked on a process and a deliberate efforts to focus on 10 catalytic niche areas, and these are research, sustainability and energy research, marine and water resource management, natural sciences, governance, management, interfaces and reporting systems, automotive research, energy research, fourth industrial revolution and digitization, health studies and medicine, feminist, womanist, Basadi theorization, and lastly, student support and co-curricular activities. As professor, we are relying on you and your team to ensure that we take these niche areas to new heights. On behalf of the Council, Senate, and the University Management, I congratulate you on having achieved this academic milestone. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of this afternoon's proceedings. Considering that we are doing this lecture online, I am sure you have planned for the celebrations of this day wherever you are. Be safe and thank you very much.